Hello everybody, I am Cassidy, I'm the HippieCatholic. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, be part of the conversation. I am so delighted to share this conversation that I had at Wild Goose Festival 2024. Thank you so much to Wild Goose for supporting the HippieCatholic ministry and for allowing me to have this speaking opportunity. And if you haven't been to Wild Goose, I highly recommend checking them out. A lot of the conversations are available on their podcast. I was also able to collaborate with a friend of mine who runs the Psychedelic Theology podcast. Caleb's awesome, and he is so smart, and he talks about all things social justice and psychedelics and faith and how all of those things interact. So I will include the collaboration that Caleb and I did in the description box below. I also would like to say thank you so much to my lovely patrons. You guys allow me to be able to do the work that I'm doing, and for $1 a month you can really make a difference. I am going to be pursuing becoming a licensed spiritual director. Also, I want to say thank you so much to Franciscan Peacemakers for collaborating with the HippieCatholic. They were kind enough to send me this lovely gift bag with all sorts of beautifully handmade goods. For those of you who don't know, the Franciscan Peacemakers, their mission is to help support women who have been exploited in human trafficking. They do amazing work for the dignity of people and for God. So if you use the coupon code HIPPIE, you will get a percentage off of your order. So thank you so much to the Franciscan Peacemakers. Feel free to comment below what kind of topics you would like to see going forward on the HippieCatholic. So yeah, I'm excited to show you this conversation that I had over at Wild Goose. Hi, my name is Cassidy Bean. I'm really happy to be joining you guys here at Wild Goose. It's my first time doing combo table here at Wild Goose. I'm really excited to be talking to you guys about two topics that are really important to me, which are mysticism and activism and how they've intersected in my life. And this is just kind of a testimonial, but hopefully something I say resonates with you, and I'd love to hear your testimonies as well. So I am the founder of the HippieCatholic ministry, and I've been doing that for 5 years now. I started it in college when I was 20, and since then I've really kind of found my voice on TikTok, but I also make YouTube content, and I also do podcasting and Facebook and all of that. I'm a progressive, I'm a Catholic, and my mission is to build a bridge between the Catholic Church and the world, where I believe the Holy Spirit's always on the move and talking to everybody. My journey's definitely been like a messy spring, and when I started I had a lot of hope, and I really, quite honestly, didn't know what I was getting myself into. I'm like, yeah, I'm a progressive Catholic, and what can go wrong? You know, kind of like heavenly rose-colored glasses. I really was really grateful to find that the ministry was really a way for progressive Catholics and LGBTQ Catholics to build community in a space where they might not have a physical location that they could do that community building. But at the same time, I also learned very quickly that if I didn't have firm boundaries, that I was allowing space for trolls and their frivolously arrogant theological arguments, and that wasn't why I started my ministry. So I kind of had to take a step back and find myself again, and that's kind of where the story begins that we're going to talk about now. So when I was making TikTok content, I took a job as a healthcare worker in a nursing home with my best friend Kate, who was recording, and it was one of the most rewarding and painful experiences of my life. I think that if you talk to any healthcare worker, that work during the pandemic, they'll probably tell you a similar thing. But working with the elderly gave me the opportunity to serve people in a very hands-on way that wasn't possible with social media activism. But like many healthcare workers, I discovered that I couldn't change everything on my own, and I also couldn't change a lot of things at all. One of my residents was dying of cancer, and the family was with them, and the social worker ran up to me frantically, was like, we need a care cart, he's dying. Care carts were these hospitality carts that had these refreshments and things for the families of the departing. And they're like, you need to go find your manager, like, because the managers were the ones that did it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go find my manager. I go in his office, and my manager is sitting right next to his telephone. Keep in mind, the social worker had been calling him for 2 hours. Just sitting right by the phone, ignoring it, looking at his smartphone in his swivel chair, just sitting there. And I'm like, hey, one of the residents is passing upstairs. We need a care cart right now. And he kind of just gets up and he looks at me and he smiles like a car salesman, and he's just like, why don't you do it? And I was just like, I was brought into silence, but I was like, you know what? I care about my resident, and I want to make sure that whoever is going to do his care cart is going to be somebody who cares about him. So I got all the ice cream he liked. He loved ice cream. He just ate ice cream the week before. And just whatever coffee, pop, anything I could find. And I went up there, and he was asleep, and his family was there. And I just was like, there's ice cream here if he wakes up and he needs anything. And I was, kind of in shock myself of what was happening. And I left, and they understandably didn't take anything from the cart at all, but I felt like it was important that it was there. And the next day he passed away. I remember after that experience, I railed at God, and I was just so angry because I was angry at my powerlessness against injustice and against death. And I felt quite frankly useless, and I ran into activism at age 20, and I was already burned out by 23. And how could I be a help to anyone? I'd been a soldier in the trenches fighting against invisible enemies of plagues and apathy, and I gave everything I had, and I had nothing left. And I went into the wilderness, the last place I could turn to in my burnout, and God led me to where I needed to be led. In this solitude, I meditated on the fact that burnout is one of the core things that unites mystics and activists. And I learned that there's 3 archetypes of victimhood: the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer. And I learned that I was embodying in my activism the archetype of the rescuer, trying to help other people to run away from my own problems. I realized that I needed to break the cycle in order to be my best self, in order to help as many people as I could help. First, I found a parish community. Now, not everybody has access to a parish community that's welcoming, but I first went to find some sort of community that was offline. I was really grateful because I was embraced by the elders of that church. The church ladies really just kind of scooped me up, and I was afraid that they might be a little scandalized by me, but they were not. They were not. The church ladies and the librarians could take over the world if they joined forces. I believe it in my heart. I also was able to find a spiritual director, and he is a Catholic priest in his 80s and very respected priest in the community. And it was kind of just interesting that God kind of paired me with him, because I feel like in many ways we're very different, but we get along very well. One of the things that I learned was Ignatian discernment, and trying to figure out if something's coming from God, and if something is coming from myself, or if something is coming not from God. And this discernment of spirits can be applied to spiritual occurrences in your life, but also in like natural things in your life, like if you're discerning a career or anything like that. So when something comes from God, it inspires feelings of joy and peace, and it also encourages you to turn away from sin, and not in a condemning way, but in a way that encourages repentance and reparation. A lot of things that come from God will antagonize the ego. They might not feel comfortable at first, but they never feel hateful and they never feel accusatory. And then when something's coming from the mind alone, they tend to kind of come and go like the wind, that you're like, oh, that's a good idea, and then you'll forget like a few hours later, and that is usually a sign that it's just coming from you, and that's okay too, but you know, it's important to understand if something's coming from within you. And then also when something is not coming from God, a lot of times these signs will flatter you at first and kind of get you in, flatter the ego, and kind of like a drug, they will take up your time and lead you to ruminating either on their flattery or on your own shame. And in my experience, the shame tends to be the more common thing, that if something's not from God, it'll try to get you to ruminate on your shame and how you can't get forgiven, or that nothing you do is ever going to repair for the things you've already done. And also, it'll encourage distrust and isolation from others, because I heard this from a hospital chaplain once, that spirituality at the basic level is connection. So healthy spirituality always encourages some form of connection, whether that be with your community or with a higher power or both. It like healthy spirituality wants you to connect with things other than yourself. So my spiritual director said that the surest way to test if something is from God is to give it time to reveal itself. And that is very hard to do, because it's very hard to give things kind of the space to show you what they are. But I agree with him that is just let things have a little time to breathe. Let them tell, like a lot of times if it's a duck, it'll quack, it'll let you know what it is. And something I needed to also deconstruct as well, and I think that a lot of ex-evangelicals might resonate with this, is that I think that sometimes people that are raised in Christian circles can kind of get a martyr complex. And this is in activist spaces too. And it makes sense, because after all, movements are based oftentimes on sacrifice. And that, you know, sacrifice in many ways is like the law of the universe. So I think that it makes sense that in activist spaces there's kind of a lot of language around being ready to sacrifice everything for the cause. The martyrs, I have veneration for the early Christian martyrs, and they are indeed glorious, and we should absolutely look to them as role models in our faith. But something that I needed to hear that my priest told me was that most of the early Christians ran. Most of them ran, and there is no shame in that. Most of them ran, and if they did not run, there would be no church. Something that I think we misunderstand about the martyrs is the martyrs had no other choice but to step into the cross that was given to them. If they had the opportunity to escape that cross, they would take it, but they were not able to. And the spirituality of martyrdom is very complex like that. You never run in expecting to be a martyr. And I realized that I kind of was because I was operating in that rescuer victim mentality. I was running in thinking, if I light myself on fire enough, maybe it'll keep somebody else warm, and maybe I'll be useful then. And then I realized that, yeah, I'd be useful for a couple of people for a little while, and then I would have nothing left. And what's the point of that? One of the terms that I want to mention is also the term signal grace, and that also ties in with discerning spirits and discerning if something's of God or if something's not. There's saints that have kind of signs that are associated with them, like Saint Therese of Lisieux has like roses are associated with her, like roses will show up at like different places. When these signs happen, it's good to accept them as gifts from God and not to cling on to them too much. I know that a lot of people love the idea of like cardinals being sent to you from loved ones and stuff, and that's always very comforting. But I also wanted to share with you a spirituality that has been really helpful to me, and it's called the Holy Face devotion. And the Holy Face devotion is all about making reparations for the sins of sacrilege. And I kind of got drawn to the Holy Face devotion through signal graces. I kept, like, every time I'd go to church, no matter what church I went to, I'd find myself sitting next to like some icon of Saint Veronica somewhere, which it's Saint Veronica's feast day today, which was wild. Like kept finding her everywhere, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, what am I getting pushed to? And I found that there was a Saint Veronica's associated with like the veil that has Jesus' face on it and stuff. I kind of sat with her and I'm like, God, like, why do these signs keep signing? Like, what is the deal? And I realized that we need Veronica and that spirituality of reparation today, because there's so many things that are beyond us that we don't have the power to change. But what we can do is hold space and offer kindness with people in their suffering, even if we cannot take the suffering away from people. And I mean, Saint Veronica, she offered a service to God himself, like a genuine service. Like that is like it's mind-boggling, like imagining that you can do something for God who has everything. So Veronica's medal, she is so cool, and we want to be like her. I love the Holy Face Chaplet. I highly recommend that prayer. I've seen it be really effective in spiritual warfare. I've also seen it be really effective in praying for people's intentions. I'm in a Facebook group where there was somebody who was struggling with housing. They were about to be homeless, and they asked people in the Holy Face devotion group to pray for them for their housing, and then somehow something came their way and people came together and helped. And I've seen all sorts of answered prayers that are answered in really uncanny ways through the Holy Face Chaplet. So I recommend that prayer for activists. And I think that also I wanted to talk about this chaplet with you guys here, because currently the Holy Face devotion is kind of mainly practiced by more traditional Catholics, which is great. But I would really like to spread it to other folks of different mindsets, so that it's not, so that we don't have such a myopic focus. Like, for example, if you look at some Holy Face like pages or whatever, a lot of times, a lot of the prayers will be praying for the reparation for like the sins of communism. And now, if you look at the history of where the order, the confraternity came from, it came from like the 1800s, which like there was more of a threat of like, I guess, authoritarian type communism that like persecuted religious groups and stuff. But nowadays, you know, and I also think that as progressives and as leftists, I think we would be the first to say that the left most certainly sins. But I think that today what we really need to be making reparations for are the sins of capitalism, and also we need to be rebuking the rise of fascism and Christian nationalism. And I don't ever see any capitalism or fascism ever called out in these Holy Face groups. And you know, it's a grassroots kind of a folk sort of devotion, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna be like, hey, you know, down with capitalism, man. Like, and I know that you guys are like-minded in that way. Together, we can most certainly make a difference. And I think that one of the most radical passages in the Bible is Mother Mary's Magnificat, and I think that we progressive Christians love the Magnificat. We love this version of Mary raising her fist to the sky, and I love that, you know, and there's podcasts like the Magnificast and the Art of Ben Wildflower that kind of depicts her like that, and definitely I resonate with the idea of God lifting up the lowly and sending the rich away empty. Through my own lived experience, I've kind of been able to see that truth in a new light through the life of a dear friend of mine who recently passed. This friend of mine was deeply devoted to Our Lady her entire life. So my friend Megan Taylor was one of the unofficial founders of Microsoft. She was a close friend of Phil Collins and was the maid of honor at his wedding. She worked with Peter Gabriel. She married one of the most powerful men in the world, was a billionaire herself for years of her life. And she used the wealth that she had to work with UNICEF and was part of organizing an initiative called Africa Unite, which built schools in Ethiopia. But after suffering many personal tragedies, Megan left the world of the rich and found herself the neighbor of my good friend Elizabeth. Megan took Liz in as her own, and she became Megan's goddaughter. Megan, Liz, and I became a little team, and we had plans to change the world, inspired by the ethics of the Catholic worker and Saint Veronica. And Megan was our mentor because she understood the complexity of humanity. She knew what it was like to have everything, and she knew what it was like to have nothing. Megan's patron saint was the Blessed Mother, and Mary's influence was felt all across her life. And on the solemnity of the Annunciation of the Lord, during the height of the solar eclipse, Megan died after a long battle with cancer this year. And often when we think of God knocking the mighty from their thrones, we progressives kind of get a smug satisfaction of, yeah, send the rich away empty. But if Megan hadn't been knocked from her throne, she never would have met Liz and I. We never would have had the beautiful relationship that we had. We never would have had the love that we had. And I feel very privileged to have been able to know her. So even in God's justice and in God's mercy, he gives us gifts, and he gives us himself, which is love. So one of the things that Megan taught me that I'll now share with you is that religion is always applied to politics, not the other way around. And always remember there's many ways to make someone's day that don't require any money. And I now ask you to take a moment of silence for Megan's memory and to pray for her soul. And I would now like to say a prayer to Our Lady of Guadalupe for justice. Most merciful Mother, you came to tell us of your compassion through Saint Juan Diego, whom you called the littlest and dearest of your sons. Give your strength and protection to all who live in poverty today, especially the young, elderly, and vulnerable. Plead for them to the Father, that they might experience the divine love tangibly in their daily lives, and that all who work for justice on behalf of the poor might grow in fortitude and humility. In these ways, manifest your charity and concern in our lives, that the weeping of humanity may be heard, and all our suffering, pain, and misfortune may be filled with divine comfort and healing. May we always know the peace of being in the cradle of your arms, and bring us safely home to your Son, Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much. And I have been talking for a long time, and I have some questions for all of you if you would like to answer them. So first of all, I'd love to know your names, and so please share your names, and I would love to know what are ways you heal yourself during spiritual and activism burnout, and what are your favorite mystical prayers? So whoever wants to go first, feel free to go first.
My name is Brig. I use they, them pronouns. I named myself after goddess / Saint Brigid. I know you didn't ask for this, a little bit of context.
No, absolutely.
I was raised very devout Catholic in a pretty, what I've come to realize was an abusive household, and the religion was definitely like warped and used to justify the abuse. Was raised very devout Catholic, went to Catholic school my whole life, went to a Jesuit college, had a crisis of faith because I came out as queer, and this was before like the Oberfeld decision that like legalized gay marriage.
Right.
Like, I'm older than I look. But yeah, so found witchcraft, paganry, but then like through a long process of like reconnecting to my ancestors and things, I've kind of come back to like a form of like folk Catholicism. I am an activist. I do a lot of I've done all sorts of activism over like the last 15 or so years, but I'm currently involved in environmental activism and trying to shut down a pipeline that the TVA and Enbridge want to shove through my little corner of the world. And I'm definitely in a period of activism burnout right here, right now. Also, like, dealt with like a lot of like personal tragedy in my life recently, and so like the activism burnout that was already kind of like compounded on top of personal tragedy just kind of like broke everything that was like hanging in balance in my life. You know what I mean? So how I heal, and I think it's a process. I don't think it's something that'll happen overnight. But is a lot of like contemplative prayer, a lot of devotion, trying to like reconnect with my mother and her trauma and my trauma and the trauma shared between the two of us. Like I've been working with Our Lady of Perpetual Help for a little while now. But yeah, just remembering that rest is a radical act, and that rest is a self-care is radical, and that, you know, the cliches of like you can't pour from an empty cup, you can't set yourself on fire to keep the world warm, you know, and just remembering boundaries, therapy.
Yes, therapy.
And holding my boundaries and practicing holding my boundaries and being okay with somebody having a big reaction or a big feeling or like in response to my boundaries, and just like learning that distinction of like I am not responsible for that. Like you were allowed to have that emotion, that it's okay for you to have that emotion, but I do not have to take responsibility for that emotion. That's holding my boundaries. So yeah, that's definitely some of the ways I think I heal. And then also just like remembering that grief isn't linear, and that healing doesn't happen overnight, and that it's all a process, and being really gentle with myself in that process. Yeah.
Thank you for the amazing work you're doing and for sharing your story. And grief is a form of activism. And I don't feel like I'm at liberty to talk about that, but I've read beautiful pieces of other people talking about that. And one of the ways that the empire, I think, keeps people down is not really allowing people to be able to grieve. There's a reason why America has such a problem with that we don't really know how to grieve as a country. Like, for example, Greece has a very funerary type of a culture, and they like, you know, honor the dead and their ancestors very deeply, and so many indigenous cultures do as well, and we need to really learn from cultures that know how to honor their ancestors. So that's amazing that that's part of your practice.
Yeah, and grief is activism, and activism is grief. They feel one of the same, like two sides of the same coin to me in a lot of ways. I'm also interested in like the etymology of the word care and its link back to grief, because that's what care means, is like to tend to grief. And thinking on that too, that in a white colonial capitalistic society, dominant society, that we don't know how to grieve, and that like it's all repressed, shoved down, get over, move on. I spent a decade down on the Gulf Coast, and while I am not Cajun myself, I learned a lot about the Cajun culture and felt very welcome and embraced into the Cajun culture. And I love, love, love the idea of funerary second lines, which is like, it's a parade, it's a jazz band, it's a marching band parade with folks decked out in their most colorful colors and to honor the dead. And so I love also that idea of like death as a celebration. And in doing my novenas, because that's where novenas originally come from as well, it's a pre-Christian concept where you would start with grief and sadness and death and have the 9 days and then celebrate at the end of those 9 days. And so like that transformative nature of grief to celebration. And for those who believe in the afterlife, for those who believe in like the promise of Christ, right? Like that is right, like death into the afterlife, like death into like what comes next, death into being received into the Lord's arms, right? Like and so tying that to the material world and into the spiritual world.
That's so interesting. I did not know that about the novena. It's so cool.
I know. I did a whole bunch. I went down a rabbit hole when my mom sent me a candle.
That's awesome.
I just have to come in with the grief thread. My favorite, one of my favorites, there's so many great Henry Nouwen teachings. I am beginning to see that much of praying is grieving. And when I see the two as one and the same, it's a game changer. So hi everyone, we're Jamie. Our pronouns are she, they, we. The quick qualifier, we were born Catholic, raised with one Catholic parent, and then our father converted to evangelical Christianity when we were 5. I have a brother who's a Dominican Catholic priest, very conservative, and I used to work for a pilgrim shrine in the Catholic Church in my early 20s, and I'm queer. So, needless to say, I went to Franciscan in Steubenville for my graduate program.
Weird.
Yeah, and so it was there that I'm like, I don't really know if I fit in this kind of Catholicism as a queer person. And the question is fascinating because most of my activism takes place in the spaces I occupy professionally. I'm a clinical counselor, I'm an author in that field, I train other therapists. I do a lot of advocacy work within therapy spaces, and what actually nourishes me is coming to places like this, talks like this. I'm also involved in another progressive ministry where I just realized there are Christians, especially Catholics, who are assholes. Like, I can't tell you how much this feeds my soul to see a Virgin of Guadalupe candle and to talk to Catholics and people doing the sign of the cross. And because I feel, I've been to Wild Goose before, and this space tends to lean ex-evangelical, which is great.
Yeah.
So just to have so much of the folk Catholicism that I love is very nourishing. And in terms of my favorite mystical prayers, they're really represented with the tattoos on each arm. So I have a pretty devout yoga practice too. That's been a big part of what's nourished me. And these are 2 mantras I pray pretty regularly: Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and Ram Ram. This prayer especially is just a way of saying, your will, not mine, be done. And it's the kind of prayer you would pray on malas, and I kept losing my malas. So one of my friends in Delhi just wrote this on me so it could be tattooed.
Can't lose it if it's attached to you.
And then this is a teaching of Hildegard of Bingen. And I got this tattooed very shortly after I was on pilgrimage in Bingen in 2016. The healing power of the natural state. Another of her teachings, Veritas, I have tattooed on my back, which is leaning into the greening power of God. And as a mystical healer, that was always the first question she would ask people: what's cutting you off from that greening power of God in your life? And I wanted something in green to honor her. And the Latin here means, a lot of people see it as the healing power of nature, which is one translation. But if you look at the more subtle translation, it's the healing power of the natural state. And that is how I reconcile being queer and being Catholic or being Christian. That the biggest way to honor God is to be the self that they made me to be. So thank you all for being here. This is beautiful.
Amen.
Thank you,
for
Hippie
being
Catholic.
here. Thank you. I'm really honored to have all of you here. That's amazing. I want to get a tattoo, but I'm not very brave.
Breathe into it, not to force you. But it's a
No,
spiritual practice. Once you start, then
Right? Yeah. I'm getting another one in like 2
Piercings,
weeks.
the tattoos, the tattoos, way less pain, way better healing.
I believe it.
My industrial, every bit of 2 years to get a full heal on that. My tattoos, like 3 months of that.
Yeah.
let me show you all another one of my Catholic tattoos, if I may. So this is a Sacred Heart of Mary.
Oh.
I got this the day I graduated from Franciscan in 2005.
Oh, that's so cool.
And at that point I was pretty well out.
Yeah.
At least that I was very out of that kind of Catholicism, still actively discerning. And I've always loved the scripture about a sword too shall pierce your heart. A lot of devotion to that. And so I wanted it on my foot to symbolize that Mary's always walking with me.
That's amazing. Now, that image and devotion scared the crap out of my Aunt Jean. She would see the Mother Mary with the swords in her heart as a kid, and I guess it gave her some slight religious trauma. She's like, why is she being stabbed? But that's amazing, and I love that devotion. And so I love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm Colleen. I grew up Catholic, and now I go to a Methodist church, non-Methodist, but and one of the things that drew me to the Methodist church that I felt like I went through a long period of time where I decided I wasn't getting the spiritual nourishment that I needed from the Catholic Church, and so I was looking around, going to a lot of non-denominational churches, and then found a Methodist church where they were really emphasizing social justice and activism, and that really attracted me. But I am starting to learn there is more social justice activism focus in the Catholic Church, and there's still a lot. Like, I love that there's a lot of Catholics here, and I feel very comforted because that's still a very core piece of my spiritual upbringing. And there are still times where, going to Mass, like, I just feel like, oh, you know what, I need to go to Catholic Mass this Sunday instead of to my church, because it's a very, comforting, traditional thing for me. But I'm trying to learn more about mysticism, so I don't think I have a favorite prayer in that respect, but it's definitely something that I would like to explore more, and so this is great to have a chance to learn more about that. I guess I actually do have a Christian tattoo, so yeah.
The signs are signing. I need to get my tattoo.
But one thing that helps me with burnout is looking for wisdom from others. I love to read, so definitely finding a book, whether it's by somebody who's overtly Christian, like Richard Rohr, or, maybe somebody like Bell Hooks that's writing, in a spiritual, so, or even like the Dalai Lama. I really love Buddhist practice teachings, and trying to incorporate that a lot more into my spirituality as well. I'm getting to a point where, more recently, where I'm like, if God is and I felt this way, I guess, for a while, but it's really coalescing more with me that, you know, if God is truly infinite, then we can interpret him and worship them in infinite ways, right? Like my love for Jesus and wanting to follow Jesus is my way of interpreting God, but maybe Allah is your way, and it's not right or wrong, right? We're all people trying to bring the divine to something that we can connect with, that our human brains can actually understand better. And so so I'm trying to just learn from, you know, all over the place. And I really actually love that part of my spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And I think also, I love what you said about like the natural state, because sometimes it is just also finding comfort in simplicity, whether that's just seeing a pretty flower when I'm out for a walk, you know, or a butterfly, or just having a moment to snuggle with my dog, and, you know, not really worrying about, like, there's so much pain in the world, and there's so much that I can't do to change what's wrong, but trying to just come back to, like, okay, what is a simple, nourishing practice for me, which are all gifts from the divine.
Thank you for sharing. That I definitely believe that everybody should follow what they believe, even if that's different than what the Catholic Church believes, or what matters is that people have faith, and that people do what is right in their heart and follow their conscience wherever it leads them. If you guys would like, this is my Holy Faith Chaplet. I want to pass it around and check it out. But
I used to have it. Oh.
yeah, and this is made by Simply Faith, and her shop's on Etsy, and she makes beautiful chaplets. Yeah, I really resonate with that prayer. And something that I like about the chaplet is that I love the rosary, but kind of it's hard for me as somebody who's neurodivergent to kind of sit down and get the focus to pray a rosary and be like, okay, there's like 6, like, I don't think they're called decades, but like there's 6 beads instead of 10. And the prayer that you say on those beads is really powerful to me. That it's arise, O Lord, and let thy enemies be scattered, and let them that hate thee flee before thy face. Comes from Psalms, and you can feel like that ancient, like, yeah, go get those monsters of capitalism and anything that is false, that's pretending to wear your name. Cast all of it out. I think that the thing that helps me not have an existential panic, though, is that God's love and his justice and his mercy are all the same. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And
What was the name of the Etsy shop?
here I simply, yeah, you guys get, check it out. But yeah. Hi. Nice to meet you.
I am not Catholic, but I had a near-death experience in December.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, but the main people that were actually there for me ended up being Catholic. And they understood this, like, level of being with those who suffered.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, just trying to pray it away, and, like, that was not, my journey. So I lost a bunch of people who they were hoping that they could just, pray away. But I just went back to work, a few weeks ago. So I have a pretty extensive history working in psych and behavior analysis. And so, but anyway, so my main friend was Mari at the time. And so she is a bit of like an kind of Catholic, but she's a mystic.
Oh, cool.
And so I saw, not even 15 minutes before it started, I was reading the schedule and I saw, you speaking. And I was like, okay, well, this is the thing to go to, so it's cool to hear about the discernment part of it. And I've been in a lot of different Christian circles, a bit more charismatic.
Yeah.
And so I think, but sometimes there's something really grounding in the Catholic faith. And I think it's more attached to the idea that we live on earth and there's pain and there's suffering. We can't just pretend and hope it's not there.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, so I was invited actually while I was laid up to the Wild. This is my first one.
Oh yay.
And so I really didn't even read the schedule until last week. And I flew in and I was like, oh my God. So it's so cool to be here in California.
Wow.
And yeah, so I'm just here to learn and meet people and a lot of different ways of thought. And yeah.
It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's good talking.
And I'm really grateful for you sharing your testimony and that near-death experiences. I'm sure that was really, really intense. Like that's.
Yeah, I woke up seeing angels for like a week straight. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like I rolled over in bed because I finally got home. I was in the hospital like a week. They wanted to keep me longer, but I said, get me out of here. I hate needles, so I don't have any tattoos. And I was like, I can't do it. I don't have it in me. But I rolled over. I was in bed, and there was an angel. He was about this big, and he had these little robes on, and it's like pretend that this is like 2D. It slipped down.
Yeah.
Then he pulled it back, and I could see like gold on the ground, and I could see just bright light coming through. And he said, it's always right here. He meant heaven, like heaven's always, because at first I was like, should I have just died, you know, like I could have just gone and it would have been so cool, God probably would have sent me back, but like I could have seen it, you know what I'm saying, but it was like, no, he showed it to me, he's like, no, it's always right here anyways. And it was, so I would wake up crying for like, you know, a few weeks actually, because I really didn't think I was going to live, and so yeah, that's why I'm here. Just kind of.
We are very happy that you are here, and that angel is telling you the truth of that the kingdom of God's on earth too, heaven's on earth now. Thank you for coming here.
Thanks for speaking.
My name's Ellie. I grew up Presbyterian, and I feel like in the Protestant world, like mysticism is a mystery. Like people don't really talk about it in my experience. And so I want to learn more and write about it, and so that other people can be exposed to it and take what they want from it. So if anyone wants to speak with me after this about mysticism and what it means to you, and while you're at Wild Goose, I'd love to talk. I practice a lot of yoga. I'm trying to kind of evolve from meditation to centering prayer. Don't do it as often as I would like to, but yeah, trying to make centering prayer a practice.
That's awesome. I love centering prayer. I don't do it enough, truthfully. It's hard. It's hard for me to sit in silence. For me, I find my center when I'm like in repetition.
I use Vespers.
Yeah,
Vespers.
absolutely. And that's awesome that you're into mysticism.
So I'm Caleb. I'm actually a Catholic, but I grew up being told that Catholicism was the center of a secret demonic plot to take over the world. And so, like when my grandparents' church closed down, both my grandpas were preachers. There were just literally hundreds of books. Same copy that was like, here's why Catholicism is taking over the world and controlled by gay people. All right. But
Sounds good to me.
yeah, right.
And Islam and Catholicism
Or the same thing.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
thing.
I learned about this conspiracy
Yes.
really recently.
But after I sort of left that sect, the sect that it was more like a cult. It was a lot of Catholics and Orthodox folks who reached out to me, took good care of me, helped me find a good church, Episcopalian. And so I've always had a very deep love for the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. So routinely I pray the Jesus prayer. I practice hesychasm. I developed in the Philokalia in the Russian Orthodox Church. I was a judge, Lord Jesus Christ, and I got a mercy in me a sinner, but in thousands of repetitions. And then I also have no contact with my parents, and my wife also has no contact with her parents. So it's very hard being young and having no parents in the world. So I frequently pray Our Lady Undoer of Knots as prayer to Mary, and Mary Undoer of Knots, I place in your hand the ribbon of my life. In your hands there is no knot which cannot be undone. By your grace and intercessory power, with your Son, my Savior Jesus, take in your hand the knot of this, that, or the other. And it worked. For me, it's worked. It's worked tremendously. And when it comes to fighting burnout and activism, I work as a political organizer here in North Carolina with the UU Church, but also just on my own. And when I was putting together Solidarity Fast for Palestine in March, it was a national thing. The sheer amount that we've conflated and organized in activist spaces, emotions with doing something.
Yeah.
That it is moral to be more emotional can be very damaging. You're using all of your energy on this instead of learning to regulate your emotions. You're not a bad person if you're not crying about Gaza every single day. You can do the work without crying every single day. Which is hard for me because I cry every single day.
Yeah.
You don't have to. And then also just being in the moment. The more that you're thinking about the soil that you're on, the place you're in, your people that you're with, be here now, see the world as it is in front of you. That is the soil and the sun and the water that long-term organizing activism grows from. So that's been very helpful for me.
Thank you for sharing your stories and your work, and thank you for fighting for those just causes. My prayers are certainly with you, and I love Our Lady Undoer of Knots too. She is amazing. I just feel really honored to be with all of you right now. And thank you.
Thank you.